My name is Valerie Rhodes. I'm 42, and last week, I watched my ex-husband get handcuffed outside the same office building where he once fired me with a smug grin and a bullshit severance check. I didn't flinch. I didn't even blink. I just kept sipping my coffee behind the tinted glass of my new corner office, one floor above where he used to sit. But let me back up. 10 years ago, I was the chief compliance officer at Westvale Financial, a mid-size firm with big ambitions and dirty secrets. I wasn't just good at my job. I was their shield. I kept the wolves at bay. I cleaned up their messes. I made illegal things look legal, and legal things look profitable. And the man running the show, Daniel Rhodes, my husband of 6 years at the time, he knew it. We were the golden couple. At least that's what the firm newsletter said when they profiled us like we were some glossy success story. He played the visionary CEO. I played the genius fixer. Behind closed doors, though, he played something else entirely. A manipulative, egotistical parasite who couldn't stand the idea that I might outshine him. I remember the night I first realized I was married to a fraud. It was a Wednesday. I'd come home early from a conference, caught a glimpse of his laptop open on the dining room table. There it was, an email chain with Margot from legal, detailing more than just quarterly audits. The attachments were photos, private ones. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I read every line, downloaded every file, then quietly closed the lid. I didn't confront him. Not that night. Instead, I started collecting every suspicious transfer, every falsified record he thought I was too busy to notice. I archived it all. I backed up everything onto encrypted drives he didn't know existed. I logged timestamps, voice memos. I even planted a keylogger on his personal device. I was patient, careful. No moves until the game was mine. The final betrayal came not from the affair, but from the boardroom. Daniel called me into a meeting one afternoon, acting tense but polite. I knew that look. He was about to pretend this was mutual. We need to restructure, he said. New direction, less oversight. He used terms like transition period and generous exit packet. I said nothing, just signed the papers, took the check, and walked out. That was 3 years ago. The next day, I met with a lawyer, not for a divorce. Not yet. I wanted a plan. I wanted to make sure when I took Daniel down, it would be permanent, legal, devastating, the kind of destruction you can't charm your way out of. The divorce came 6 months later, clean, uncontested. I didn't want alimony or half his assets. That would have tipped him off. No, I wanted him to think he won. Then I disappeared, changed my name back to Rhodes, my maiden name, moved across the city, started my own boutique compliance firm with the severance check he smugly handed me. Within a year, my firm was vetting companies 10 times cleaner than Westvale, and I made sure the right people noticed. 2 years in, I landed a major contract, a government probe into financial misconduct at mid-tier firms, including, you guessed it, Westvale. I didn't offer. I was invited. That's how good I'd become, and that's when I began to twist the knife. Westvale had skeletons, big ones, and I knew where every bone was buried. I coached investigators, leaked tips under anonymous emails, sent copies of documents I'd accidentally found, and all the while, I played the concerned outsider, just a consultant doing her job. Daniel never saw it come. He was busy trying to scale the company, impress venture partners, polish his image. He even did a podcast last year about resilience and leadership. I listened to it while getting a pedicure. The man sounded like a walking Lincoln. I knew the investigation would heat up, but I didn't expect the timing to be so perfect. Just weeks before Westvale's biggest investor pitch, federal agents came knocking. Wire fraud, falsified financials, insider trading, the works. Daniel was stunned. He went on a PR blitz, denied everything, blamed former employees, me included. But the thing is, I wasn't just some bitter ex. I was now the compliance expert for the very agency auditing him. Still, I wasn't satisfied. Not yet, because Daniel's true power wasn't in his title. It was in his ability to manipulate, to gaslight, to twist perception like a magician. I'd lived under it. I knew its weight. I needed something more, so I went for the heart. His second wife, Kendra, a woman half his age, and twice as naive, had no idea what she'd married into, but she had doubts, and those doubts brought her to me. We met once, in secret. She looked like I used to, tired, unsure, shrinking. She told me Daniel had maxed out her credit, forged her signature on a second mortgage, and screamed at her for asking questions. I told her the truth, showed her the file, every asset he'd hidden, every woman before her, every message. She didn't cry, she took notes. She filed for divorce 2 weeks later, froze his accounts, sued him for fraud. I didn't orchestrate it, I just gave her the map. The morning Daniel was arrested, I didn't celebrate, I didn't dance. I just sat at my desk, looking out at the skyline, feeling a stillness I hadn't known in years. Revenge isn't about rage, it's about clarity. He took my career, he tried to erase me, so I built a better one. He made me feel invisible, so I became untouchable. Later that night, I poured a glass of wine, opened my laptop, and added one last file to the archive, a clip of him being led out in cuffs, face pale, eyes darting. I named it Closure.me4. Then I closed the folder and let it go. I didn't tell anyone for weeks. Not my team, not my friends, not even Melissa, my closest confidant since college. I kept it quiet, not because I was hiding, but because I wanted to savor it. Privately, silently, the way you savor a fine wine alone on the balcony, knowing no one else would understand the taste. But secrets have a way of leaking, especially in this city. A week after Daniel's arrest, I walked into my office and found Melissa standing by my desk, phone in hand, eyebrows raised. "You're gonna tell me eventually," she said, waving the phone. "Or I'll just read the whole damn indictment myself." I gave her a look. She raised both hands. Okay. But seriously, did you have anything to do with this?" she asked, half whispering, half laughing. I smiled. I gave the truth a little room to breathe, that's all. She stared at me for a second, then cracked up. "You are a terrifying woman, Valerie, and I love you for it." The news made the rounds quickly after that. Westvale was tanking. Investors pulled out. Employees jumped ship. Daniel was released on bail, of course, but the damage was done. His image, once carefully curated, had become a meme. I saw one on Reddit. His face next to the words, "Leadership goals. Don't be this guy." I didn't laugh, not really. I didn't feel joy in his fall. I felt balanced, like the scales had finally corrected themselves. Still, some nights, I'd wake up at 3 a.m., heart racing, mind replaying the past, the humiliation, the meetings where I was silenced, the way he'd rest his hand on my back at parties like he owned me. I'd stare at the ceiling, wondering if I'd ever be completely free. Then came the letter. It arrived in a plain white envelope, no return address, hand-delivered to the office. I recognized the handwriting immediately. Daniel, that arrogant slant, always leaning forward like it was in a hurry to be read. Inside was a single page, no apology, no regret, just this: "You win. Congratulations. I hope it was worth it." I read it twice, then folded it neatly and dropped it in the shredder. The next morning, I told my assistant to change my personal number. Again, if he thought that note would rattle me, he didn't understand me at all. This wasn't about winning. This was about truth, about making sure people like him don't keep walking away unscathed. But there was one last thread to cut. Westvale still had a few remaining allies. Small-time firms, legacy clients too slow to notice the rot. One of them, a logistics tech company, had reached out to my firm for compliance assistance. The CEO, a former drinking buddy of Daniel's, wanted to clean house before regulators turned their gaze. I took the meeting. He sat across from me, smug and clueless. "We want your guidance," he said, "but I also want to be clear. We're not admitting any wrongdoing." I tilted my head. "Then why hire me?" He shrugged. "Optics." I nodded slowly. "Here's what I'll need," I said, handing him a list of files, access logs, staff communication protocols, and financial records. He frowned. "That's a lot." "You wanted optics," I said calmly. "This is what integrity looks like," he agreed, begrudgingly. "The truth is, I didn't need the job. I didn't need the money. What I needed was the chance to finish cleaning up the mess Daniel left behind." One by one, I was going to dismantle the entire network of enablers that protected him for years. 3 months later, the logistics firm was under audit. A junior staffer emailed me anonymously. "Thank you," she wrote. "We were scared to speak up. You made it possible. That one message, it made everything worth it." I was standing outside a gallery in Soho when the next surprise came. Melissa had dragged me to some avant-garde exhibit about shadows and silence. I wasn't paying attention. I was halfway through a glass of champagne, pretending to admire an installation made of burned tax documents when I heard someone say my name. I turned. It was Kendra. She looked lighter, like she'd shed 30 pounds of stress and 10 years of regret. "I didn't expect to see you here," she said, voice softer than I remembered. I nodded. "You look good." "So do you," she said, then added, "Thank you for everything." I sipped my champagne. "You did the hard part. I just opened a few doors." She laughed. "Still, no one believed me when I said what he was like, but you did." "I knew because I lived it," I said. "People like Daniel, they follow patterns." She stepped closer. "He's still trying to spin it, you know. Says the government's out to get him, that his ex-wives ruined him." "Let him," I said. "I don't live in his version of the story anymore." Kendra looked away for a second, then back at me. "You ever feel guilty? Like maybe it was too much?" I thought about it. "No," I said, "not for a second, because guilt is what they use to keep us small. Guilt is how they make us stay." Daniel had played that card for years. It didn't work anymore. After the gallery, I walked home alone. The city was lit up in blues and yellows, reflections stretching across the wet pavement like brushstrokes. I paused at a bakery still open, bought a warm croissant, and sat on a bench near the park. It was quiet, a kind of peace I hadn't earned through kindness or compromise, but through fire, through truth, through the long, cold work of reclaiming my voice. I didn't need Daniel to understand why I did it. I just needed him to never forget that I could. It was around that time I started getting invites, panels, conferences, podcast. People suddenly wanted to hear from the woman who took down Westvale. Of course, none of them said it like that. They called it heralding a new era, compliance, or a fresh voice in corporate accountability. I accepted a few. One was in DC, a panel about women in leadership. I sat between a Fortune 100 executive and a tech startup CEO who kept interrupting me to agree with himself. When the moderator asked, "What's the hardest decision you've made in your career?" I didn't hesitate. "Leaving," I said. "Not the company. The idea that being quiet meant being safe." The room went still. Then the applause came. Not loud, but steady. Real. Afterward, a young woman approached me. She looked barely 30, clutching a notepad and fighting back tears. "I work in compliance," she said. "Every time I push back, they call me difficult. You made me feel like maybe that's not a bad thing." I touched her shoulder. "It's not. It's dangerous to people who benefit from silence. That's why they say it." She nodded, eyes full. "Thank you." Moments like that made it clear I hadn't just burned a bridge. I'd cleared a path back home. I started a series on internal ethics. Short, practical breakdowns for young professionals navigating corrupt systems. I called it Gray Area. Every post got more engagement than the last. People weren't just watching, they were sharing, commenting, messaging it. Not just women. There were men too. Men who'd watched their wives get steamrolled in meetings. Fathers whose daughters were told to tone it down. They wrote to me with stories, questions, confession. My inbox became a second office, one I checked daily with a sense of duty I hadn't felt in years. Then one message stopped me cold. It came from a former Westvale employee, a guy from the audit team I barely remembered. He said, "I didn't know how bad it was until I left. Thank you for tearing it down." Attached was a file. Audio, grainy, slight static. I played it. Daniel. His voice. "I don't care if we fudge it. Make it clean on paper. That's what Valerie used to do." My hand froze over the mouse. I leaned back, stared at the ceiling. So he was still blaming me, still pretending the firm's rot had nothing to do with him, still invoking my name to justify his lies. I forwarded the clip to my contact at the bureau. He replied the same day, "This helps. Thank you. The last nail was going in. But even as Daniel's world collapsed, mine was expanding. Ethan entered my life during that second panel event. He was speaking about whistleblower protections, calm, articulate, devastatingly precise with language. After the talk, he approached me, said he'd followed my work, asked if I'd like to continue the conversation over coffee. We met the next morning. One conversation turned into 4 hours, that turned into dinner, and eventually, into something neither of us had planned for ease. Ethan didn't ask me to explain the past. He'd walked through his own fire, years of corporate law, a toxic mentor, a public exit that nearly cost him his sanity. He understood what it meant to start over, not because you wanted to but because you had to. We didn't rush anything. We just made space for each other. The first night he stayed over, I caught myself watching him sleep, not because I didn't trust him, but because peace still felt like a foreign country. He stirred, opened his eyes. "You okay?" I nodded. "Just not used to this." He reached for my hand. "You will." A month later, Daniel's trial began. I didn't attend. I didn't need to. Every headline, every update, every analyst breakdown, it all told the same story. Evidence overwhelming, defense scrambling, jury expressionless. Daniel, once the golden boy, now just another cautionary tale in a suit 2 sizes too big. Melissa called the morning of the verdict. "Guilty," she said, "on 5 counts. There's sentencing next month." I closed my eyes, let the words settle. Guilty. It didn't bring joy, just finality. She hesitated. "You sure you don't want to talk to the press?" "No," I said. "I don't want to be the story. I just want to keep building mine, because that's the real revenge, not just watching them fall, but rising so far they can't even see you anymore." That evening, I stood on the balcony with Ethan, watching the city buzz below. He poured 2 glasses of wine, handed me one. "To what?" he asked. "To silence," I said. "But the kind you choose." He clinked my glass. Later that night, I opened my laptop and typed a new post for Gray Area. "You don't need to set yourself on fire to keep their version of the story warm. Let it go cold, let it freeze, then light your own path." I hit publish, then I closed the laptop and leaned into the quiet. The sentencing came on a gray Thursday in early November. I didn't go to the courthouse. I didn't watch the live stream, but I knew exactly when the judge spoke those words. 10 years, federal. A friend from the department sent me the transcript. I didn't read it right away. It sat in my inbox for days. When I finally opened it, I read only the last line. "The defendant's actions demonstrate a repeated and intentional abuse of trust." I closed the document. That was enough. For weeks after, I noticed how quiet things became. No messages, no press, no smug LinkedIn updates from Daniel or his former co-founders. The void was deep and peaceful. Sometimes I'd get an alert from a distant cousin or college acquaintance. "Did you see what happened to your ex?" They always phrased it like gossip, like a punchline. I never answered, because for me, the story was over. But for others, it was just beginning. I kept hearing from people, former employees, interns, even competitors, who said the same thing. "Your story gave me permission to leave," or "I finally reported my manager," or "I started my own firm." I didn't plan to become a symbol. I wasn't interested in being some corporate Joan of Arc. But I realized something. There are more of us than they think. People who've been used, silenced, underestimated. People who know exactly how much strength it takes to stay silent, and how much more it takes to finally speak. It was early winter when I decided to expand Gray Area, not just blog posts or short videos, but a full platform, tools, resources, templates for whistleblowers, a hotline, a legal support fund. I brought in Melissa as COO. She was ruthless in the best way, organized, sharp, unfazed by chaos. We ran it like a company. No fluff, no sugarcoating, just facts and fire. By spring, we had thousands of subscribers. Our legal templates were being downloaded daily. HR departments started sending their employees to our workshops. Quietly, of course. No one wanted to admit they needed us, but they did. I even got a message from one of Daniel's old board members. Just wanted to say, "You were right." I didn't respond. I didn't need to. Ethan and I moved in together that summer. We found a loft in the West Village, exposed brick, tall windows, a roof deck. It wasn't flashy, it wasn't curated for Instagram, it just felt real. One evening, we sat on the roof with takeout containers and cheap wine, watching the skyline stretch across the horizon. He looked over and asked, "Do you ever think about what would have happened if you hadn't left?" "Every day," I said, "but not with regret." He nodded. "Just perspective." "Exactly." I told him about the last dream I had of Daniel. It was brief. We were at a table. He was talking. I wasn't listening. Then I stood up, walked away, and didn't turn back. "That wasn't a nightmare," Ethan said. "No," I replied. "It was closure." Weeks later, I was invited to a university to give a guest lecture on ethical resilience. The room was packed. Students, professors, even a few alumni in the back. I stood at the podium, looked out at all those curious, skeptical eyes and asked, "How many of you have ever been told to stay quiet for the sake of the company?" Almost every hand went up. I nodded slowly. "Let me be clear," I said. "You do not owe your silence to systems that thrive on secrecy. You do not owe loyalty to people who treat you like insurance. And you do not ever have to set yourself on fire to keep someone else warm." There was a beat of silence, then applause, loud, sustained. Stepped off the stage, knowing that maybe, just maybe, I was giving people the thing I never had, a blueprint. That night, back in the loft, I pulled an old box from the closet. It had been sealed since the divorce. Inside were papers, photos, flash drive, a dusty bottle of cologne Daniel used to wear. I picked it up, turned it over and smiled. Then I walked to the trash and dropped it in. One by one, I let it all go. The letters, the memos, even the USB drives. I didn't need them anymore. The evidence had done its job. The files had served their purpose. They were part of a past that no longer defined me. I wasn't the woman who got burned anymore. I was the one who rebuilt, smarter, stronger, quieter, not to prove anything to him, but to remind myself of who I really was all along. That weekend, Ethan and I adopted a dog, a clumsy, oversized mutt with ears too big for his head, and a bark that could shatter glass. We named him Chance, not because we believed in fate, but because we'd both learned something crucial. Sometimes the best revenge is taking one on your terms, in your time, and never needing to explain it to anyone.